Well, thank you very much, Glenn, and thank you, Ayata, for this opportunity. I know that you're all very busy after hearing 5 wonderful finalists when it comes to this notion of innovation. I was asked to speak about this idea of innovation. How do we further this? And I have to say, it almost feels like a moot point when you have 46 entrants into this and 5 finalists, which is really fantastic to see. But what my focus is going to be on the mindset of innovation, how we can do a little bit more. How can we see further and further innovation get into the air cargo industry? What is it that we need to do about it? Now, before I do that, I want to identify or at least maybe explain what we call innovation in a few words. The first of which, it's an idea or an invention of a good or service that actually benefits the customer or that end user. It doesn't have to be an invention, and very often it's not. We saw some fantastic ideas early on, which very much were inventions or ideas, but sometimes it's about bettering what we already have. It's the notion of creating something that's replicable at an economic cost, something that can get out there and be done over and over again. It's also about the deliberate application of information and, more importantly, imagination. And that's what we want to talk about here. And why can't we increase this a little bit further? What is it that we really need to do? And lastly, it's the notion of satisfying that customer's need further than what we're doing right now and to the expectations of not exceeding those. Now, innovation is all around us. And we know that there's so many examples. I'm going to share some with you. For those of you that wouldn't recognize this, you may not when you look at it. It may look like a lounge, a sitting area. This is an actual Puma sports store. And they realized that their customers were younger millennials, and they wanted to gather in groups. They wanted to have access to gaming and Xboxes while they're shopping. And they merged the two worlds together to create a unique idea when it comes to the shopping experience. This is a photo of an airport, as a matter of fact, where you can do your grocery shopping by scanning the codes, and by the time you get home, your groceries are delivered to you. Or the metros, the subways that are popping up, where you can do very much the same, taking technology that we already have today and applying it onto basic needs of customer experiences. We look at businesses such as Starbucks. This is just coffee. But for some reason, it's become a phenomenon. It has been for decades now, where people line up for that experience. It's nothing new. We've been drinking coffee for a very, very long time. We've been going to coffee shops at corners for a long time, but that experience was turned around. From your very industry in aviation, when Virgin America signed up with Banana Republic to leave Christmas gifts for people in the airplane. That's what we refer to often as innovation. It's about taking ideas that are out there and reaching to the heart of the customer that you have, no matter what the industry is. Has anybody ever shopped at IKEA? Have you ever walked out of there with the one item you might have gone in for? Of course not. Because they figured it out. If we can recreate the experience for you, if we can put up the living room and the bedroom and all of the accessories, you're going to pick up on that. They've recreated our living experiences. That, to me, is innovation. And the problem today is we don't innovate as much. And there's a very simple reason for that. Life has become all too easy. We no longer want that mind space that's available for us to be able to find the solutions that we should be looking for, to be able to go beyond the norms or beyond the boxes that are available to us. I want to share something with you that might help frame how we need to work on innovation through this video here. If you can get the volume, please.
One of the most interesting phenomenons of human beings is our creativity, right? I mean, our ability to transform the world, our ability to imagine new possibilities, our ability to probe the perimeters of possibility, remix the present, to see into the adjacent possible, which Stephen Johnson refers to as a shadow future that hovers over the present state of things, a map of all the ways in which the present can reinvent itself. Creative states are finally starting to be understood. Editing literally goes dim. So there is a kind of scrambling of the self. There's a scrambling of like the superego that's trying to like correct everything you do and censor and filter what is otherwise collective subconscious, active imagination, so to speak. And I think that these artists, these athletes, when they go into the flow state, you know, I'm sure that they've had their 10,000 hours of practice in whatever their skill is, but then they go into that flow state. Perfection is not just about control, it's also about letting go. They shut down their lateral prefrontal cortex and they enter the realm of the numinous, the realm of the imaginal, the realm where the dream becomes real. You know, that space, that headspace of flow is the place where dreams are born.
flow state. This is often what's missing. We do not allow ourselves the opportunity to jump into that flow state where our mind is focused on one particular area. Science continues to prove that when we reach that level of creative state, our frontal lobe starts to light up like a Christmas tree. Everything that's going on there. And everything that's going on in our minds, we actually reduce the level of circuits that are going to any other part of the brain that starts to focus on one thought. And that particular thought is what brings us further into what we call flow. That the inner thoughts that we have start to align with the outer world that's there. That's the level of innovation. But this can't happen on its own. We can't simply ask people in our organizations, can you please enter a creative state? Can you please enter flow? And then everything will be all right and we will innovate and we will recreate the industry that we're in. It takes a little bit more than that. It takes this notion of transformational processes. It takes leaders that push us from transactional to transformational, from left brain thinking to right brain thinking. And I know that's sometimes a challenge. We've got scientists in the room, we've got mathematicians here, we've got engineers, we've got all sorts of professionals in there. And very often this idea of right brain and creativity is a very, very scary thought. In fact, for many of us, we don't even access that part of our brain because we grew up in households where we were told that when you grew up, you must become a doctor or an engineer. Those were the only two approved career paths. And if heaven forbid that a child came forward to their parent, and I know many of you will recognize this in the room, that if your child came forward and said, you know what I'd like to do in my future, I'd like to become a poet, or I'd like to become a sculptor or a painter. We simply wouldn't have that. But that's where that right brain thinking comes from. And as leaders, we have a responsibility to open that up further, to allow that right brain element, to allow that flow state to come in there. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 principles when it comes to creativity and opening up that flow state. First of which is attitude, and I'll talk about that further. The second is what we refer to as resilience. And last but not least is fear. And I'll explain certainly that last one a little bit more as we move across. Attitude. Zig Ziglar had once quipped that positive attitude cannot get you anything, but it can get you everything better than negative attitude can. And this is a critical one. It is really about the state of mind that we find ourselves in. And very often it's about what we call limiting self-beliefs, something that we do to ourselves, that we place on ourselves, telling us we simply cannot do this. We simply don't have the means or the resources or the capabilities. It's our own beliefs that tend to hold us back. And when that happens, we get lack of action, which lands with poor results and leading us into that vicious cycle when it comes to limiting self-beliefs. We have to be able to break that. Mahatma Gandhi had once said, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. So ultimately, it comes down to us and those ultimate beliefs that we have. What do we feel that we can do? And do we have the right positive attitude to be able to achieve more and more? So it is really about developing a positive attitude. How do we do that? Develop an attitude of enthusiasm. Whatever it is that you do in life, whatever it is that you do for the air cargo industry, develop a sense of enthusiasm. Enjoy that. Furthermore, be what we call a good finder, focusing on solutions and not problems. There's so many problems around there in the world, but if we're all thinking about that, nothing new will come out of that. We will continue on in that same cycle with no advancements. Change the way that you react to situations. And I'll address change a little bit later on also. But we have to start to pause for a moment and say, can I see this differently? And last but not least, protect your mind and feed it. We don't do enough of that. I'm not saying drop technology and your mobile phones and applications, everything there. However, feed that mind and make sure that we're able to enter that flow state. I want to get into resilience for a moment here. And the famous poet J. Willard Marriott had said once, strong timber does not grow with ease. The stronger the wind, the stronger the trees. And I think being resilient is critical when it comes to this notion of flow state and innovation and creativity. Our ability to withstand the pressures, the difficulties that come our way. And for that, we require what we refer to often as emotional intelligence. And I know when I often say those words, people say, well, hang on. We don't want to get all soft and have our heart shown and our weaknesses. That's not what it's about. Today, more and more in organizations, emotional intelligence is playing a far bigger role than what we refer to as IQ. We're looking for people who have what we refer to as emotional self-awareness. And what that really means is the ability to understand our strengths and weaknesses. We can leverage both, as a matter of fact. It is about knowing our limitations and breaking beyond those, but looking at our strengths also. It's about a strong sense of identity and self-worth, knowing that every time we show up to work, we bring something valuable to the table. We bring know-how, we bring culture, we bring social elements that are in there that are so critical. And be aware of your emotions. It's not a scary word. You can bring those to the workplace. You don't have an unemotional self that shows up to the office and an emotional self that's at home. Both those worlds must collide, and we have to bring them forward with us. And lastly, use that awareness to guide your thoughts and behaviors. The more that we can link those, the better members of society we can be, the better contributors to innovation and creativity in the workplace can we be. Now, lastly is fear. I'm not talking about the fear of spiders or snakes or heights or anything of the sort, but rather a very particular fear, and that's the fear of failure. We don't fear failure enough. We should be afraid of failing. That's what makes the difference in the world. Anup Kochhar had once said, it's being branded a failure that causes the most pain. When failure changes from being a verb to becoming a noun. This hits right at home for so many people. And that's be it whether you're a child growing up in school, years in university, in the workplace, we're too afraid of that. And I tell you today that you need to make sure that your fear of failure is larger than any other fear you have. Whatever it might be, the fears of rejection, being told no, your idea is not good enough. Fear the failure of trying and working hard more than anything else that's out there. More so, harness that energy. It is amazing what it can do to you when you fear that. Beyond that, let it drive that success. Make sure that it becomes your utmost responsibility. The top priority you have is to ensure success. And you will fail time and again, and that's okay. I'm always reminded of Thomas Edison, who had said had failed over 10,000 times in trying to create the light bulb. And I suspect a lot of people thought this guy was crazy. But what I really appreciate about him is that he reframed his failure. That, funny enough, after 4,531 tries, he decided that rather than looking at 4,531 failures, he saw that as 4,530 eliminated possible solutions. He reframed the problem, and he did not fear failure. No matter what anybody said, he went out there and tried harder. The Chinese, very interestingly, use two characters when they want to describe crisis. Those two characters represent two words, one of which is threat and the other one is opportunity. And I ask you today, when you think about change, and change tends to be a very scary thing, and for many of us, we associate the word change with crisis. Do we see that change as a threat, or do we see that as an opportunity for us? This is something that's critical. For those of us that see it as a threat, we run the other direction. We hide. We certainly do not apply the elements of positive attitude. We do not apply resilience and going the extra mile no matter what stands in our way. And we certainly don't fear failure enough, but rather our social existence and anything else that stands in our way. You have that decision to make of whether it's a threat or an opportunity for you. And I hope that you choose opportunity each and every single time. I'm going to leave you with one final thought, and this comes from Steve Jobs' famous ad for Apple back in the day. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world usually do. And I think we've got a huge opportunity ahead of us, that if we think crazy, we keep that positive attitude and we keep that resilience, and we look at fear and say, not today, we have the ability to change the world, and more importantly, to change the air cargo industry. With that, I thank you very much, and I wish you the very best of luck. And for those 5 finalists, good luck also. Thank you.